Good evening, everybody. Ah, yes, it's Tuesday once again. And what does Tuesday bring for us? It brings us a night of story time. This time, for the first time, I am bringing you a Tuesday Mech Warrior story. Those of you who are regulars on the channel know that I do my Mech Warrior stories, Battletech stories, typically on Thursday nights and my weekend nights. They are my, search warrior stories, shall we call them. While I am playing Mech Warrior Online, we listen to Battletech books. Well, you listen, I read. But by special request, I am reading today Trial Under Fire. This request came in to us from one of our regular listeners, Tronis. Tronis is located in Germany and got turned on to these after finding his father's stash of Battletech books, Trial Under Fire being one of them, in German nonetheless. And as this book would not have been in my normal listing of books that I would have read, I agreed that I would go ahead and make it a special edition for a Tuesday read. So we're going to go ahead and read it. For those of you guys who are Battletech and Mech Warrior fans, you may know this book as the book that kind of mirrors the story of Mech Warrior 3. Now, I don't think I ever played Mech Warrior 3. I know I've never read this book. So, we get to listen and learn together. But, it's okay. That's the way we do a lot of these books together. The first time, just you and me listening to the book, reading it together. And of course, I will have this up on my YouTube channel afterwards. As normal, I will break this down by chapter as I put it up there. However, because this is a shorter book by a considerable margin than what I normally read, really it's a novella. It's not a novel, it's a novella. I may get through it in one day. It may get done tonight. It may take me 2 weeks to get through it. But my plan is to not only put it up there in chapters, I'll also probably bulk it all together and give it to you in one go so you can just get the entire thing and have a listen. So, everybody, sit back, relax, and prepare to enjoy as we dive into Trial Under Fire. Trial Under Fire by Lauren L. Coleman. The Story of the Damocles Commando. Acknowledgements. This story would not have been possible, first, without the vision and support of Jordan Weissman, who created Battletech, and one day called me up and asked me to do the novelization of an adventure storyline he had created. 15 years later, I've never regretted saying yes to anything he's asked me to attempt. Additional thanks are due Greg Gordon, Sam Lewis, and Brian Neistel, all of whom, in their time, moved me a bit further along the path. And a wave at Kristen Catherine Rush and Dean Wesley Smith. Yep, still writing those books and loving every memory. Thank you. For Jordan. 1. The Jaguar's Reach. String text log 330-1347. Field Commander Charles Antonescu reports. Southern Pass held against Smoke Jaguar force. Coordinated resistance on Huntress has been smashed, but no indication of Khan Osis's presence. Surviving clan warriors available for interrogation. 408-1955. Prince Victor Steiner Davian to all field commanders. Huntress is ours. 409-0942. Lieutenant Michael Tonai, Dest, on debrief of prisoners. All evidence indicates that Khan Lincoln Osis escaped Huntress for Stronamekti. However, of possible worse consequences are rumors that one Galaxy Commander Corbett is rallying Smoke Jaguar forces at a remote staging area, flagged for immediate investigation. 409-2315. Gerard Cranston reports to Prince Victor. Galaxy Commander Brendan Corbett, the Smoke Jaguar officer who led forces back to Huntress, bypassed the capital for the colony world of Tranquil. From this command post, he has sent out a call that all surviving Smoke Jaguar warriors should rally to his position rather than to Khan Osis on Stronamekti. Reconstructed records prove that Corbett has received several responses. Our friend Trent believes that Tranquil may possess the command and production resources to resurrect Clan Smoke Jaguar. 410-0601. Prince Victor Steiner Davian, commanding. Unacceptable. Low planetary orbit. Tranquil. Clan Homeworlds. 26 April 3060. The smallest briefing room aboard the dropship Blackhammer. Enough space between the gray-painted bulkheads for a small table surrounded by half a dozen chairs, 3 of the seats currently occupied. A duct in the ceiling blew down tepid air tasting of the metallic tang left by atmosphere scrubbers. The Starleague ensign hung over one wall, a silver 8-pointed Cameron star against a black field. The room's one concession to tactical briefings, a flat D screen opposite the flag, connected via spiraling cable to the keyboard cradled over the left arm of Lieutenant Connor Sinclair. Connor stood next to his own seat, typing one-handed, his gray eyes studying the blank screen with a frown of concentration. The young Lance leader kept his dark brown hair cut at the edge of military regulation length. Though his uniform was cut along the original Starleague Defense Force lines, he'd added a regimental patch from his old unit, the Davian Heavy Guards. All mech warriors assigned to one of the Damocles Commando Lances had done the same. In his lance, he counted 1 from the Kestrel Grenadiers and 2 from the 1st Aragon Borderers, warriors he had never served with before. Finally, the screen glowed to life, and against the backdrop of a star-studded spacescape, a world grew to fill the frame. Dark blue oceans covered a majority of the planet's surface, with 2 large land masses standing out in brown-green relief. Tranquil, he named the world. The planet rotated quickly and froze when the smaller continent came under the camera's eye. One final flurry of keystrokes, and as the land zoomed in to fill the screen, he set the keyboard into a special wall receptacle designed to hold it. This is where Galaxy Commander Corbett has decided to re-establish the Smoke Jaguars, if he can. The young lieutenant swept his gaze over the assembled lance. We're here to kick the supports from under him. Asking quite a bit, aren't they? Dominic Payne shifted uneasily in his chair. I don't know about any of you, but personally, I'd feel better about this with a full regiment backing us. Connor shook his head. Pacifying Huntress costs the task force too much, and Prince Victor has no idea what he'll face on Stronamekti. Remember, they're trying to shut down the entire war. He shrugged. The 6 Damocles commando teams are all they can afford to spare. Nothing like feeling expendable, Dominic said, his light tone exaggerated to the point of sarcasm. Tessa McConnell tugged at the thick braid of red blonde hair lying over one shoulder, then leaned over to slap Dominic on the arm. "We're not here to take on the lot of them," she reminded her new landsmate. "Just to give Brendan Corbett some sleepless nights until the prince shows up a ride in the black coach." She looked toward Keith Andrew, and then back to her new lieutenant for support. Nodding his appreciation for the backup, Connor forestalled further outbursts with a raised hand. "Also, the clans are known for absorbing the weak. If we make Corbett appear ineffective, Clan Wolf or maybe the Diamond Sharks will finish the job for us." He offered a tentative smile. "Then we can all go home." That pulled answering nods from everyone. Living off warships in clan space was no substitute for the worlds of the inner sphere. For home. He turned back to the flat D screen. "So, here's our little part in the rating." He brushed a hand over the snow-capped mountain range which locked away a hook-shaped peninsular region from the mainland. This peninsula appears to be the only land really improved by the smoke jaguars. Our recon probes found a few minor towns and one small city. What little they have in production capacity and command assets will be concentrated here. Insertion of our battle mechs will be made on our next turn around the planet, a low-orbit pass over the area via drop pods and stealth chutes. Surprised looks at the mention of parachutes. "It will be early morning, local time," he explained, "and we don't want landing flares to give us away. The Black Hammer and the Eclipse will deploy 6 Lance-sized commando teams. We're Commando 1, but don't let that go to your head. It just means that we hit the ground first." Sober expressions greeted him. Battlemechs might be the pinnacle of military technology, walking the battlefields of the 31st century with titanic measure, but the clans bred talented warriors and had made a few technological advances in their years of isolation away from the inner sphere. They owned too many advantages not to take them serious. Dead serious. The good news is that we aren't supposed to see any heavy resistance. The bad news is that we aren't supposed to see any heavy resistance. We'll certainly try to keep it to a minimum, and 3 mobile field-based vehicles will drop with us, giving the commando good on-site repair and refit capability. We recon this first operations area. He pointed to the inside edge of the peninsula's hook, taking targets of opportunity, and then hit a facility out at the tip of the peninsula, which intelligence believes is a mech production factory. Once all 6 teams have completed their objectives, we rendezvous for dropship pickup. Connor reached over to the keyboard and hit the power toggle. The image on the screen winked out of existence with a light hum cut off by a popping noise. "Any questions?" No one, not even Dominic, raised a hand. "Then let's get buttoned up." No one moved quickly, he noticed. These were good warriors, if a bit nervous for their first mission with each other. His job was to hold them together long enough to grow comfortable as a team, to complete the mission and make it home. He stepped in the direction of the door, stopped in front of the Star League ensign to stare into the hub of the silver Cameron star. One tine ran off in a long spike to the right, the guiding light of the Star League. "Let's all remember why we are here," he said, "and what we represent." Then he was through the door and heading for the Black Hammer's mech bay. He hoped that reminding them of their higher duty owed the Star League might assuage some of the doubts they must certainly still feel. It certainly helped him. Connor's bushwhacker was already secured into its drop pod, ready for imminent deployment. The egg-shaped shell acted as heat shield and extra armor for the penetration of Tranquil's upper atmosphere. Explosive charges would separate the pod from Battlemech well after insertion, allowing the large chute to arrest the fall and settle the mech easily to the ground. Connor squirmed through an access opening and lowered himself on a short chain ladder to the shoulder of the squat Titan. Standing just shy of 8 meters in height, the Bushwhacker was shorter than the average mech, and with its turret-style shoulder joints and far-spread arms was actually wider than it was tall. For a 55-ton machine, it was well-armed and armored, however. Capable of running up to 85 kilometers per hour, perhaps a touch more if he handled it right, the Bushwhacker made a good raider. A technician held a spotlight into the pod, outlining an open hatch set into the Battlemech's head. Connor dropped down into his cockpit, dogged the hatch behind him with a quick spin of the inside wheel. Off came the slacks and uniform shirt, leaving him in knee-length shorts, t-shirt, and combat boots. A mech warrior's true uniform. Pulling his cooling vest from a small locker, he then stored his officer's uniform in its place. The vest was made from ballistic cloth ribbed with small tubes of Ashqa coolant, designed to offset the extreme heat of a Battlemech cockpit. Connor pulled it on and settled himself into the Bushwhacker's pilot seat. A power cord stretched from the right side of the control chair, and he plugged its end into the mating socket on his cooling vest. The chilling coolant immediately raised goose flesh on his arms, though he knew he'd be thankful for its touch later. From a pouch to one side of the seat, he pulled self-adhesive monitoring pads which he stuck to his upper arms and inner thighs. The trailing leads he gathered in his lap, then grabbed his neurohelmet off a nearby shelf and settled it over his head. Among other things, the neurohelmet helped translate his own sense of balance to the Battlemech's massive gyro. He plugged the leads into the sockets, set into the left side of the helmet. A thicker cable, this one feeding from its housing on his control panel, fastened to the neurohelmet at a large socket set into the throat guard. Prepared, all that remained was to bring the Bushwhacker to life. A series of toggles released the dampening field which banked the fusion fires of the Battlemech's reactor. A rumble more felt than heard rose from below, and in back of Connor's seat and his cockpit control panel lit up as power flooded the circuits. Heat scale registered in the cool blue tones of a Battlemech at rest, and all threat indicators remained silent. His heads-up display glowed a ghostly transparent green against the inside of his helmet's face shield. He turned off the HUD, not needing its distraction until ready for combat. Security check, Lieutenant Connor Sinclair. He waited while the computer tore apart his voice and matched it against the secure print buried within its memory. Voice print match confirmed. The computer's voice was soft, almost feminine, but still mechanical in delivery. Connor was not one of those who preferred to alter it for more human characteristics. Some mech warriors even used recordings of their wives or girlfriends. A bad habit in his opinion. Battlemechs were machines of warfare. Better to not get too attached. Proceed with security sequence, the computer prompted him. Because voice prints could be faked, mech warriors often installed a second layer of security, a code phrase which only they would know. We are united and committed to a bright new future, Connor said, having chosen a line from Prince Victor's first Star League address. Verified. All functions now at your command. An easy switch opened up the secure channel of his lance. Connor Sinclair online and ready for drop. Commando 1, report. Tessa, Keith, Dominic, one by one, they all checked in, ready for drop. Connor switched over to Black Hammer's command frequency. Commando 1, ready for drop, he reported. A crackle of static, and then the voice of the dropship's communications officer.
All commandos ready, report ready to drop. The Eclipse has matched our insertion path. 15 minutes to drop window. Prepare for gravity changes.
15 minutes. Connor ate away at the time, checking all systems twice, and weapons once again for good measure. Both long-range missile systems, one launcher riding over his left shoulder and the other replacing his left arm, checked out fine, fully loaded and missiles armed. Diagnostics on the centerline large laser and both machine guns red and green. The Midron 80mm autocannon on his right arm showed an intermittent fault, so he cleared the ammunition feed, which pulled the depleted uranium slugs up from his right torso and refed the weapon. The fault indication disappeared. It would do for now. A minor fluctuation of gravity warned Connor that the dropship was maneuvering for insertion. The main thrusters wavered in strength for a moment, and then were dampened, losing the artificial gravity brought on by constant thrust. Lateral thrusters rolled the Blackhammer and created pockets of microgravity constantly shifting in direction. Used to solid ground beneath his feet, the Lance Leader rode it out with teeth clenched so tight as to hurt his jaw.
Commando 1, prepare for deployment. Good hunting, Damocles. Counting down from 20, 19.
The Bushwhacker's computer was fed a signal from the dropship, and the computer voice overlaid the final few counts with its own pre-drop checklist. Connor listened in to the last few seconds, tensing for the drop. Shield integrity confirmed. Power curve optimal. Drop check complete. All systems nominal. Landing coordinates confirmed. Then a solid weight slammed into his back as the pod was rudely ejected from the Blackhammer. He couldn't breathe, and felt certain in that second that his heart had stopped beating as well. The pressure squeezed at his stomach. Then, as abruptly as it had begun, it was over. The pod, Bushwhacker, and pilot were in free fall. Only a light bucking indicated that the drop pod was beginning to hit upper atmosphere. One of the cockpit auxiliary screens flickered to life as the computer patched it into sensors mounted on the outside of the shield. It showed dark space interrupted by the harsh pinpricks of stars as they were seen only from space. The pod rolled on its attitude jets, bringing the Blackhammer into the camera's eye. The Union-class dropship was an immense white-gray sphere hanging against that black backdrop, growing smaller by the second. He saw a blur against one arc of the hull, which might have been another drop pod launching outward. Everything seemed to be proceeding according to plan, when it all fell apart. No warning. If Connor had blinked, he might have missed it. Even so, he would never be certain if the azure flare was a true memory or supplied by his mind to explain the sudden explosion that burst from the side of the dropship. A flash of possible coherent light. A silvery spray of melted armor raining out into space, chased by the catastrophic evacuation of atmosphere, equipment, and personnel through the rent in the Blackhammer's side. The dropship tumbled toward the edge of his screen even as the emergency comm frequency overrode his receiving equipment to chatter a flurry of mixed transmissions into his ear.
What the hell was that? Can't get a reading on. You confirm Mach pod deployment. Day! Mayday! We're going down!
On screen, the dropship rocked again as if a fragile globe struck by an invisible fist. More debris spilled out as the vessel slid away from Connor's camera angle. Silence reigned for all of 3 seconds, the lieutenant gripping the arms of his control chair with near panic strength. Then his comm gear changed over automatically to a new channel, flashing an emergency frequency for the Eclipse. A new voice whispered in his ear, "My God, we've lost the Black Hammer." And Chapter 1 is complete. We move on now to the next chapter. Yeah, these will definitely go by much faster than normal. Here we go. 2. First contact. Lieutenant Sinclair, please stand by. What do you mean that's all we have? You're certain? All right, let's go with it. Lieutenant, this is Corporal Thomas Sorensen, commanding your mobile field base vehicles. We're in contact with Captain Taylor on the Eclipse, trying to ascertain what has happened. The Eclipse has abandoned its run. Status of the Black Hammer is still uncertain. I've yet to raise your lancemates or any members of Commando 2 and 3, but as of this time, we're still go. The mission clock is running. You are falling slightly off target. We predict a shallow water splashdown north of what appears to be a fishing village. We will await you at our designated landing area, near a good refit site. Your optimum route has already been programmed into your navigation computer. Luck to us all. APCs were no match for a battle mech. Right hand easy on the Bushwhacker's control stick, and his left hand nudging the throttle. Connor Sinclair turned his back on the burning vehicles and the oily smoke they trailed skyward over the fishing village. The Bushwhacker's left foot sideswiped one building, tearing a gaping hole into the wall and collapsing the covered porch. A flatbed hauler parked in his way was crushed even flatter beneath the other foot. Then he was free of the village and moving into the valley, which ran roughly parallel to the coastline. He throttled the mech into a run, keeping part of his attention on the HUD and the red icon which showed a firefly closing on his position. A light mech and an older design, dating back to the original Star League. The Firefly's trio of medium lasers still demanded a modicum of respect. He would smash it from range and then move on toward rendezvous. The comm system crackled to life with an abnormally loud burst of static. "Leave it! Hauling explosives! Commander!" A long pause. "Half! Bridge!" He'd set his system to scan known clan civilian frequencies, though the receiver was having difficulty pulling in more than a broken signal. Thomas Sorensen had apparently picked it up as well. "Lieutenant, did you receive? Labor cast frequencies, but something about explosive charges. Watch your step." As if to underscore the warning, threat indicators screamed for attention a split second before the Bushwhacker lurched to the left. A flight of missiles slammed into the battle mech's right shoulder, blasting away precious armor, but not near enough to upset the massive gyro balancing the war machine. Connor hauled the control stick over, tracking his targeting reticule into the corner of his main screen. The Bushwhacker twisted at the waist while continuing to run forward. Through the ferroglass canopy, he spotted the Firefly as it angled in behind him. The lighter mech had arced over a low range of nearby hills on jump jets, closing faster than anticipated to score first with its long-range missiles. Still, a 5-pack of LRMs weren't enough to threaten him, unless he let the clan warrior into the Bushwhacker's 6, at the weaker armor protecting his back. Drifting his reticule over the Firefly's outline, the crosshairs burned from red to the bright gold of a hard weapons lock. The targeting system also gave him an audio cue, a soft tone which promised a good missile firing solution. Connor squeezed into the shot, smiling his victory as his large laser burned away armor over the Firefly's right leg. His twin LRM racks added to the other mech warrior's misery, peppering the head and upper body of the light mech. Waiting for his weapons to cycle, Connor checked his screens with a practiced glance. A quarter-mile further along, the valley ended at the foot of a 4-story bluff. A ramp gave access to the upper plateau, and against the skyline above it, a second Firefly now moved to engage. The light traffic scattered quickly, caught between a running battle mech firefight and the second Firefly ready to defend the ramp. Only a tractor-trailer rig remained on the bridge, apparently abandoned. Connor guessed the first Firefly would now circle further afield and avoid him until it could join up with the new arrival. Except he'd forgotten to take into account the clan practice of single combat. In their quest for ultimate glory and honor, clan warriors tended to fight alone, spurning help even as it stood nearby. Although outmassed by 25 tons, the first Firefly was not about to share the kill. It cut back inside the bushwhacker's firing arc, pouring on the speed in an attempt to close and bring its medium lasers into play. With the Damocles commando mech still at a full run toward the ramp, the Firefly never stood a chance of making it in close. Connor's autocannon cut too low, turning the ground with a hail of 80mm slugs. Cursing silently, the Inner Sphere mech warrior toggled again for missiles and lasers. The ruby beam of his bushwhacker's large laser splashed over the Firefly's left shoulder, stripping it down to titanium skeleton. The first missile flight was picked off by the anti-missile system riding in place on the light mech's right arm, but the following flight slammed into an already weakened right leg. The knee joint bowed outward, rolling the leg out over the ankle actuator. The Firefly stumbled and went down, right leg snapping off at the knee and forward thrust torso burying itself lasers first into the valley's soft earth. It wasn't getting up again. Now, Connor was grateful for the cooling vest he wore. Waste heat flooded the bushwhacker's cockpit as the fusion reactor spiked from the power draw required for the double salvo of weapons. Heat sinks built into the engine worked almost as quickly to shunt it away, leaving Connor with only a few seconds labored breathing of the stifling air. No time to wait. Turrets flanking the ramp suddenly popped up and began to snipe at his battle mech. A stream of light autocannon fire rattled against the bushwhacker's right side, chewing into armor and raining the protective composite down to the ground in shards and splinters. Easy targets, these. Connor's centerline lasers silenced them in a matter of seconds as he continued to move against the ramp, intent on putting down the second Firefly hard and fast. Which was when the fireball blossomed at midpoint up the ramp, consuming the parked tractor-trailer rig as it threw a gout of flames skyward. The ramp collapsed, its structural integrity shattered by the force of the explosion. For a moment, Connor thought the second Firefly might somehow be responsible, but no, not with the light firepower the design carried. Then he recalled the truck and the earlier transmission. Hauling explosives. Damn. Sorensen, this is Connor. I've lost the ramp. He'd also lost any advantage range might have given him as the Firefly opened up with medium lasers and missiles. The bushwhacker stumbled under the onslaught, gyro thrown out of balance, but Connor's steady hand on the control stick compensated for the rough treatment. Corporal Sorensen did not exactly sound thrilled. I'd recommend you find another way then, and fast, sir. It's not like I can build another, he snapped, trading salvos with the Firefly. The bushwhacker's large laser ate away at the other mech's shoulder, while the Firefly's trio of lasers again spit emerald pulses into the larger machine. Connor's autocannon missed again. "Yes, sir." Sorensen's voice was a touch more respectful, though plainly worried. "But there's an Owens up here prowling around. If it finds us, we're done." The Firefly had stepped up to the edge of the bluff, rising over the retaining wall which had helped bolster the strength of the ramp, and now was all that remained of the structure. "Build another," Connor whispered to himself, trying to hint from his own words. He dropped his crosshairs down to the retaining wall, scoring a deep cut across its face with large laser, and then hammering at it with missiles. The LRMs could not acquire anything approaching a solid lock, but this close, they hardly needed it. The explosive warheads dug deep, shattering the bulwark. The wall crumbled in an avalanche of dirt and rock and broken ferrocrete, undercutting the Firefly, which fell backward and then tumbled down the side. Crushed armor plating littered the slope. Connor stepped his mech forward, bringing one foot down on the fallen Firefly's right side and caving it in. Laser fire and autocannon slugs exploited the hole, working down into the central cavity and smashing the large gyro which all mechs depended on to keep upright. Carefully, the young mech warrior stepped over the stricken Firefly and worked his way up the treacherous slope. "I don't know what you did, Lieutenant, but the Owens is heading your way with something to prove."
"Something to protect, you mean?"
Connor said, as he topped the rise and throttled into an easy walk. His scanners registered the Owens' approach, but also the large facility built into the cliff facing of a nearby large hill.
"Jackpot, Sorensen. If those dishes on top are any clue, we walked into a clan communication facility, and a rather large one."
His first flight of missiles was already streaking gray contrails through the air when the Owens' large laser flayed into his leg to slice away better than a half-ton of armor protection. An inner sphere Omni-Mech design, no doubt brought home as spoils of war, the pilot had chosen its one hard-hitting long-range configuration. Connor opened the throttle, guiding his bushwhacker into a loping pace that angled around a small mound, putting it between him and the charging Owens. Let loose with another double barrage, and this time adding his laser into the barrage. The clans built well enough when it came to protection from the elements and the possibility of light collateral damage, but they rarely hardened auxiliary sites against direct attack. Why should they? Any other clan wanting to contest the area would bachawl, challenging the defender to meet him in open ground with any or all defending forces. The assaulting force would then match the defenders, and a contest initiated. While Connor appreciated the ritualized methods of the clans, protecting essential but non-hostile facilities, part of the Inner Sphere's purpose in attacking clan space was to remind them of the devastation total warfare could bring. On his fifth salvo, the main communications dish twisted about on its seating, then wrenched away to fall down the mountainside and smash into one of the larger buildings. Ceilings caved and walls crumbled as the dish rolled through and finally smashed itself to scrap against the ground. Several fires sprang up in the ruins, the death blow for the facility, which left an Owens. Hidden behind the low hill, Connor had a 50-50 chance of deciding which way it would circle around. Of course, it might choose to come over the top, but skylining a light mech was one step beyond bravado, and in throwing distance of suicidal. Then again, this was a clan warrior. He crouched the bushwhacker as low as its profile allowed, then shifted about to face the hill, one arm pointing off in each direction so that no matter which way it came, the Inner Sphere warrior could hope for the first shot. It swung around on his right. Connor pulled at his autocannon trigger, snapping off what should have been an easy shot. The stream of depleted uranium slugs again sliced low, throwing up a geyser of blasted earth which sprayed the Owens but did little to deter it. Connor swore fluently. Trying to salvage something of the situation, he wrenched the right arm upward. His curse had barely left his lips when the second burst cut off prematurely. Fault lights flashed for his attention. It required the briefest glance to see the weapon registered a feed mechanism fault, the same problem he'd noted back on the Black Hammer. Only here, in combat, what had been a concern before now spelled out grave danger. No time to clear the jammed feed. Connor swung around to put his backside to the hill before the much faster Owens circled in behind him to carve at his weak rear armor. The Smoke Jaguar warrior made a stab for it, but was a touch too slow on the throttle. The Owens ended up point blank with the bushwhacker, toe to toe, and trading hard-hitting strikes. Gem-colored light flared between the two, the Owens owning the advantage as it brought two medium lasers into play, while Connor was limited to his centerline large laser and a pair of machine guns. The bushwhacker's weapons fire sanded armor off the light Omni-Mech. A sudden jump in the heat profile of the Owens let Connor know that he had slipped past a flaw in the armor, carving away at the heat shield which helped contain the fusion reactor's waste heat output. He smiled in grim satisfaction, hoping to press the advantage. Then, emerald laser fire walked from the bushwhacker's left shoulder up across its head, splashing over the cockpit's ferroglass canopy. The cockpit shook with incredible force, throwing Connor repeatedly against his 5-point harness and the seat back. The restraining straps dug painfully into his chest, and his vision swam with the purplish haze after effect of a laser blinding. Several new alarms rang out, deafening in the close confines of the bushwhacker's cockpit. And Connor Sinclair couldn't see well enough to know what was wrong. It hurt to breathe. The muscles over his chest and abdomen bruised against his harness. Alarms continued to sound their warnings. Connor blinked away the ghostly images the laser fire had burned over his eyes, vision clearing as the haze swept back. Only the lightly polarized tint to the canopy and his neurohelmet's faceplate saved him from more permanent damage, though in combat, even a second's blindness could prove lethal. His wireframe damage schematic showed heavy armor loss all over the bushwhacker. Armor protecting the Battlemech's left arm was now a memory, the Owens' emerald pulses finally eating through the last of its protection to cut away at the myomer muscles and shoulder actuator. The arm hung useless down the Battlemech side. Further damage concentrated primarily along left leg, right torso, and the head, promising breaches in those areas soon enough, if he gave the Smoke Jaguar warrior the chance. Slapping quickly at the irritating alarms, Connor silenced the distractions, then worked throttle and stick to shift the bushwhacker, shuffling the mech around in a tight circle. The Owens gave chase, but sluggishly. Shimmering steam and sooty black smoke leaked out of several rents in the armor covering the small Omni-Mech's upper body. The shielding damage he scored earlier had overheated the Owens, robbing it of speed and likely making targeting more difficult. Apparently, the clan pilot had not been able to convert over to Smoke Jaguar's better heatsink technology, leaving the Owens vulnerable after rapid-fire laser barrages. It was an advantage. It would be all he needed. Connor smiled grimly, second-guessed the Jaguar warrior, and throttled forward into a tight circle outside the Owens' now limited turn radius. Too eager, the clan pilot had committed himself to chasing the bushwhacker's rear arc, and now overextended himself. Connor caught the Owens by the back instead. The centerline large laser lanced a ruby beam through the Omni's weaker armor, cutting away more engine shielding. If the shutter which trembled the Owens meant anything, it also nicked the gyro housing as well. His machine guns hammered in afterward, this time smashing all the way through and releasing the inferno harnessed at the heart of every battle mech. A golden blaze burst from the Owens' chest cavity, coring the Omni-Mech even as fiery tendrils worked through the machine to burst out of shoulder and hip joints. The mech flew apart as easily as a ragdoll shredded at the seams. Armor shrapnel peppered the bushwhacker, which rocked backward in the face of the explosion. A few large pieces of slag that were once actuators and titanium support structure slammed hard into the battle mech, as if an attempt by the Owens to take the larger machine with it. He rode it out, jostled once more against his 5-point harness, but otherwise coming through unharmed. The bushwhacker presided over the ruined frame of the Owens, and a battlefield of scorched earth littered with smoking debris. No enemy threats showed on the HUD. The field was clear. A 10-minute walk from where he had put down the Owens, Connor found the trio of MFB vehicles gathered into a triangular formation down inside a shallow wash. Thomas Sorensen had chosen a good site. Enough flat area to break out the repair facilities, Connor noted with relief, checking his armor loss and damage to the bushwhacker's left arm. There was also the autocannon to fix, as he had no intention of losing one of his best weapons in the middle of battle again. The 55-ton battle mech had certainly looked better. Still, 3 clan mechs down and 1 comms facility scrapped. Not a bad day, though he was ready to quit well ahead. That wasn't going to happen. "Good to see you, Lieutenant," Sorensen waved from the ground near one of the MFBs. He had a handheld radio unit. "Ready to take on the world?" "I hope so." Sinclair walked the bushwhacker into the area framed by the 3 vehicles, but delayed his shutdown procedure. "What do you mean?" Sorensen's report lacked anything in the way of personal feelings, the way a good intelligence report should be given. "I mean, we're still go to hit the factory. You and Dominic Payne, and these 3 MFBs. "Dominic made it?" "We heard from him just a few minutes ago. He's moving to regroup. Also, survivors of Damocles Commando 2 made contact with the Eclipse. 2 mech warriors and an MFB support vehicle, trying to complete their mission down at the Southern Hydroelectric Facility. If not the best news, it was at least encouraging. Team 2 was out the door after his commando. If 2 of them made it down, then both Tessa and Keith would be out there as well, trying to make rendezvous. But no extraction then? Even from up in his cockpit, he saw Sorensen's head shaking. "Run tape," the corporal ordered. A new voice cut into the conversation. Tinny and faint from recording and rebroadcast, Connor still recognized it. Nathan Taylor, captain of the Eclipse. "We made no determination of the status of dropship Blackhammer. We assume it is down. Act in accordance with mission specifications until we facilitate your extraction. Taylor, out." That was Captain Taylor's official response to my request for information. Thought you might like to hear it for yourself. He set his ship down in the mountains north of the peninsula rather than risk facing whatever knocked the Blackhammer from the sky. Commandos 4 through 6 are trying to break through the mountain passes, and so come down onto the peninsula to rendezvous and pull us all out of here. But they are meeting with resistance. Our extraction is, essentially, an unknown factor at this time. We're expected to proceed on mission. No normal op would ever go forward after such a catastrophic loss. But then, this was hardly a MechWarrior's run of the planet mission, and as much as Connor recognized the odds stacked against him, he could hardly blame Taylor for not wanting to risk the Eclipse, their only way off Tranquil after what happened to the Black Hammer. Whatever had happened to the Black Hammer? He dialed for a confident voice. If we move fast enough and hit hard enough, we might make the factory complex out at the peninsula's tip. Commando tactics. That was our mission, and we can still accomplish it. With half the force originally allotted? He shoved aside the doubts. Get Dominic on our flank, but have him hold off by a few kilometers. In that captured clan Shadowcat of his, he'll make the perfect flanker, able to guard our line of advance and hit any approaching force before they realize he's with us. It will help keep the clan forces pinned in place while we sweep straight for the factory. Sorensen could not keep his own doubt from showing in his voice, or even in his question. You really think this will work? Connor toggled off the comm system and proceeded with his shutdown without answering. It saved him from having to choose between enthusiastic hyperbole and an evasive reply. Besides, Sorensen was smart enough to figure out the truthful answer for himself. What choice did they have? All right, guys. Chapter 2 done. Quick AFK, and I will be right back with Chapter 3. Ah, my camera followed me. Stupid camera. There we go. I'm back. All right, here we go. All right. I'm heading forward. Don't be late. Roger that. Good luck, Dominic. Yeah, sure. All right, Lieutenant. Dominic Payne has moved ahead to set up his flanking attack against the mech factory. He will move in as soon as you begin your run, meeting you at the second bridge. From there, the two of you can proceed to the island facility. And we've finally made progress on the codes recovered from that destroyed communications facility back on the beach. The data has allowed us to break part of the clan's encryption system, tapping into some of their radio chatter. The proper codes have been entered into your BattleMech computer, so you will receive a direct feed of clan intentions from now on. Here's hoping it helps.
Hurt. Cannot. No!
The scream faded to static and then silence as the Thor's missile ammunition detonated in the over-the-shoulder launcher, tearing a gash through its left side and setting off the main ammunition bin by sympathetic explosion. A red-orange fireball ripped through the interior of the clan Omnimech, shattering its turret-style waist and amputating both legs. Its left leg flipped up and over the head of Connor's bushwhacker, landing in the river. The right leg was thrown far to one side, into a nearby minefield where it triggered several of the hidden explosive devices. A twisted, misshapen frame of metal landed several meters off to one side, all that remained of a once powerful war machine. One of the best clan designs, piloted by a tenacious warrior. Star Commander Freya had dogged their tracks for several kilometers.
Careless fool!
A weak transmission, partly obscured by the static. The kind Connor recognized as the Smoke Jaguar communications on which his computer could now eavesdrop. There was no hiding the disdain and anger coloring the voice. Unless he missed his guess, that would be Star Captain Hassan Fury, who had been referenced in other intercepted transmissions. Corporal Sorensen's relief was just as evident. "Nice work, Captain. You were right. We should have sidetracked to take her down earlier today." His lungs felt on fire, gasping in breaths of the cockpit's scorched air. He choked on the ozone scent of burnt insulation from the monitor which had shorted out. Just as well he was saved any comment, with Dominic Payne interrupting. "This is Gunner, moving in from the west. Where's my support?" Connor was running behind. A glance at the mission clock told him just how many precious minutes he'd wasted dealing with the Star Commander. He had already taken out the site's powerhouse, a fairly impressive plant, considering there was only the one mech factory, a large set of greenhouses, and some storage and barracks facilities to supply. But by now, he should have been meeting up with Dominic to hit the small offshore island on which the factory was situated. "Where you at, Dominic?" "Fighting off a Blackhawk Kurita variant and a Strider just this side of the second bridge." A brief pause and a wash of violent static. "Check that. Make it a Blackhawk KU only now." "Damn, that hurt." "Better question is, where are you?" Making up time fast as he could. Running deeper into the small outpost, Connor pulled up short as his heads-up painted a threat icon, the computer tagging it with the code for a Puma Omnimech, primary variant. The computer couldn't always tell Omnimech variants apart, but the twin particle projection cannon made this an easy ID. He didn't need to glance at his armor schematic to see that one solid salvo from those PPCs would score through any location on his bushwhacker, his weak armor courtesy of Star Commander Freya. According to the HUD, the Puma waited just around the corner of the two-story greenhouse complex. He plunged through the glass wall, trying a shortcut. Star Captain Fury must have had the place wired for sensors.
"There's one inside the project,"
he said almost at once.
"Protect those facilities."
Easier ordered than accomplished, with a 55-ton battle mech already loose inside the building, and no way to come after it but to smash your way through and engage. The Puma tried to hedge, shattering one wall with a swipe of the arm, but not actually entering itself. A mistake, leaving Connor the advantage of better cover. His bushwhacker nestled within a screening growth of lush, food-bearing trees and plants. Only one of the PPC's azure whips struck him, the man-made lightning-melting armor which runneled from his left torso to puddle among the plants and start several trees afire. The Bushwhacker's autocannon missed wide, smashing to tiny shards another wall of the greenhouse. The feed mechanism fault light flashed a quick warning and then went out. Again. Large laser and missile racks made up for the treacherously undependable autocannon, scoring deeply into the Puma's notoriously thin armor protection. The uneven exchange was enough to convince the Jaguar warrior that he needed some cover, but too late. The light mech throttled into a run when Connor's second strike slammed into it. Missiles pockmarked leg and chest, the ruby beam of the large laser cutting in afterward and probing deeply into the center torso. The Puma dropped like a puppet with its strings cut, shaking as if with a palsy. Large chunks of metal shot out the rent in the armor at high velocity, the gyro tearing itself to pieces in catastrophic failure. The Puma tumbled gracelessly through a thick patch of quillar. Connor turned his back on it to smash his way through several support beams and the far outside glass wall. Behind him, the greenhouse facility collapsed inward like a broken house of cards. Fury didn't require monitors. Wherever he was waiting, the destruction of the greenhouse had to be easily visible. "Stravig!" he cursed over smoke Jaguar frequencies. "I will crush them myself!" But where was the local commander? And for that matter, where was Dominic? Running out from between two buildings and over the second bridge, the Bushwhacker's footsteps clanged against the metal decking. The lieutenant saw the broken and smoking form of a destroyed Blackhawk, its cockpit obviously smashed inward by a Gauss round. Dominic's handiwork, sure enough. But no sign of the Shadowcat. "This is Gunner. I'm over the last bridge and hitting the factory. There's an Orion over here." Both questions answered at once. The Orion was an old inner sphere design, not quite on par with a Clantech Omni-Mech, but at 75 tons was only one step shy of an assault mech and was one of the larger machines he'd seen so far. Certainly the Star Captain would be piloting it. And with 30 tons over Dominic's Shadowcat, the Commando Mech Warrior was definitely outclassed. Edging the Bushwhacker over 85 kph, its maximum speed, Connor ran the squat war machine over the coastal plains and toward the third bridge. Too slow. Slender towers flanked access to the island factory, but the lieutenant paid them little heed as he saw Dominic's Shadowcat in a deadly dance around the larger Orion. The latter mech moved slow, but with lethal grace, always on the verge of smashing Dominic's Omni into scrap. The Shadowcat packed a deadly punch with its Gauss rifle, but then the Orion also masked twice as much armor protection as the smaller machine. Connor pounded his Bushwhacker across the bridge, never fast enough, then dug his shovel blade feet into the soft earth of the small island as he raced up into the battle zone. Too late. Metal fragments littering the ground winked in the late afternoon sun, testament to the hard-hitting engagement. The Orion's left leg was all but stripped down to titanium skeleton, and large gouges in chest and right side told of other Gauss hits. But even as the Bushwhacker's targeting reticule burned the deep gold of a hard lock, drawing a bead with large laser and autocannon, the 75-ton machine struck back with a vengeance. A flight of 20 long-range missiles, launched from impossibly close, scattered a flurry of jagged holes over the Shadowcat's right arm and body. Twin medium lasers grouped into Dominic's left leg, spot welding the knee joint immobile. Then the Orion's 80mm autocannon ripped into the previous missile damage, hammering at support struts and knocking the smaller Omni-Mech back. The onslaught proved too much for the mech's gyro, and it toppled backward into one of the auxiliary factory buildings. The wall caved in behind Dominic's Shadowcat, and then everything seemed to happen in slow motion as 2 stories of wood and stone collapsed over the top of him, burying the mech warrior alive. "Dominic, no!" Connor mashed down his triggers, probing out at range with his autocannon and large laser. He heard the remembered voice of his academy instructor. "Battle mechs, they take a whole great deal of killing," and figured the odds were better than fair that Dominic Payne had survived the fall and collapse of the building. A bit banged up and needing help to dig his way out, but alive. He wouldn't stand a chance, though, if the Orion blasted through the rubble after him. Star Captain Hassan Fury had to be distracted. Stopped. Despite the desperation, he pessimistically predicted that his autocannon would fail or shoot wide. No need to ruin a perfectly bad history now. The Mydron manufactured weapon did not disappoint. The stream of depleted uranium slugs passing off the left arm of the massive Orion. They chewed the corner away from the main factory building and undercut one of the 3 main smokestacks enough that it started a slow topple. The ruby lance of his laser, however, struck dead on, sloughing away half-melted armor plates from over the Orion's blocky chest. As if a bystander suddenly tapped on the shoulder, the Titan's head first swung around in search of the annoyance, and then up came the left arm. The monstrous machine might have been simply pointing directions out to somebody, except for the flight of 20 LRMs that suddenly speared out from the cylindrical launcher replacing the left hand. A quartet of missiles arced too wide, but the majority of the swarm flew unerringly into the oncoming bushwhacker and robbed it of forward momentum as explosions blossomed in a staggered line leading from right leg up over the body and then down along the left arm. A single missile slammed in near the cockpit, rattling Connor, but not enough to throw off his own aim. 2 small missile flights from his own launchers answered the Orion's challenge, peppering left leg and arm. The extended range laser speared directly into the heavy mech's undamaged right side, splashing molten armor against its hip and over the short grass that grew over the island. The autocannon misfired, but did not jam. A small favor, only considering its lack of performance. A wave of heat slammed into Connor as the fusion reactor spiked, its heat scale reading heavy into the yellow band but dropping fast. Giving a few seconds, the young lieutenant could only hope to keep up his optimum curve and not suffer the sluggish reaction by overheated mimer muscles or interference in his targeting system. Time was a luxury he did not own, however. He rushed in close on the Orion's left side, preferring to face off against the heavy LRM system and arm-mounted medium laser than weather the brunt of Hassan Fury's full attack, which could include another laser and an autocannon, his presumably working. Of course, he had to assume Fury to be an elite warrior, which meant he might be able to coax the Orion around fast enough to bring all weapons to bear regardless. It turned the fight into a gamble, but against a 20-ton deficit, Connor risked his life regardless. The Orion did try to pivot hard around. Connor read it in the exaggerated swing of the angular shoulders and cross-step of right foot in front of left. Then, the heavy-class mech stumbled and nearly fell. From Fury's narrow recovery and the Orion's awkward stance, the battlemech's hip joint had apparently frozen in a half-extended position, some combination of Connor's last missile attack and the molten armor splattered by his large laser. It cut into the machine's movement considerably, able to keep up with the bushwhacker, but just barely so. It evened the field, pitting Connor against a larger but critically damaged battle mech, piloted by a certainly more experienced mech warrior. At point-blank ranges, an LRM system rarely achieved a targeting lock, and even then, the missiles would have trouble arming in the short flight. As demonstrated before, Fury did not seem to suffer for those drawbacks. The cylindrical arms swung round, flashing out with the sapphire light of a medium laser, and a new flight of 20 missiles that hammered mercilessly into the bushwhacker's upper body. Red warning lights strobed on the control panel as one group of missiles breached the left side, tearing into the bushwhacker's supporting titanium skeleton and blasting away feeding mechanisms for the shoulder-mounted missile rack. Not that Connor would have tried to fire his own LRMs regardless, but with a failing autocannon, the damage continued to rob him of any reliable firepower. "Last time pays for all," he whispered, voice strangely loud in the tight confines of his neurohelmet. His targeting reticule already burned golden. He drifted it down the side of the Orion to settle over the left leg. Opening up with machine guns, the mech warrior hammered away armor from the left side and left leg as he watched his heat scale fall down into the shallow end of the yellow band before toggling for his center-line large laser. The ruby lance sliced deeply, past the remnants of armor protecting the Orion's left leg. The beam did melt away enough of the slag freezing the other battle mech's hip joint that it freed up, but only for a split second as it continued to core deeper. Myomer musculature parted like flesh beneath the scalpel, and the laser ate into the ferro-titanium bones of the Orion skeleton. The framework sagged, melted away, and then finally telescoped in on itself. The 75-ton machine toppled left, and this time there would be no recovery. The left arm caught against the ground first, adding enough a twisting force to turn the mech and plant its head cockpit first into the earth. The protruding cockpit canopy smashed back, shattering the ferroglass and driving the framework back into the pilot's command area. "Freebird!" Fury's final static-laced scream of denial and pain cut short. Connor winced, imagining the Star Captain's final seconds. "Star Captain Fury, what is your status?" A new voice, full of his own authority, and not a little anger. Connor did not recall hearing it in common chatter earlier. He spent little time trying to actually place it. Dominic still needed help. No, he didn't. The Shadow Cat was rising from the center of the building, shrugging off one wooden wall that had fallen over its shoulders. From Connor's vantage point, the factory building looked hollow, though of course that made no sense. But then he couldn't argue with the way Dominic Payne simply stood and kicked his way free of some light debris. Wood framework and plywood painted to look like brick or stone or metal. Even the windows were painted on. No glass or actual openings. "Better be careful around these buildings," Dominic transmitted. "You'll want a closer look at them, and at those towers flanking the bridge." Before Connor could ask after the mech warrior's comment, the same voice as before interrupted. "Hassan Fury, this is Star Colonel Ratash Osis. You will respond now!" "He doesn't sound happy," Sorensen said, the MFBs just now crossing the third bridge onto the island. The corporal seemed very satisfied with that idea. Connor looked over the fallen Orion and then to his lancemate's erect Shadow Cat, a tight smile tugging at the edge of his mouth. So, in fact, was he. "Figures, don't it?" Dominic kicked at a support beam, one of several that held up the facade factory wall. "All that work for a decoy site. A Potemkin village." For once, Connor felt the drain of Dominic's pessimism. Out of their mechs while the MFB's personnel worked to fix the machines up, their own and a wounded but repairable Orion. The two mech warriors and Corporal Sorensen had walked into the open back of the factory building resembling a steel plant. 3 coal-burning stoves had been rigged up to provide lots of smoke, funneled up into the wooden tower above to give the impression of activity, the manufacture of armor, apparently. Strobe lights set behind the few real windows in the main plant simulated the sparking of welders. Only the towers flanking the bridge were real, and even more disturbing. Laser towers, Connor said, shaking his head. Naval-grade lasers, ready to knock any dropship from the sky that tried to make a run against this decoy factory. He exhaled, long and hard, glanced at Sorensen. Now we know what happened to the Black Hammer. Dominic looked worried, more so than usual. This Galaxy Commander Corbett doesn't play by the usual clanner rules. No Bachal? Striking at a dropship from ambush rather than the glory of battlemech combat? Doesn't this seem like a deviation from standard Smoke Jaguar tactics and philosophy? He looked around to see if anyone shared his opinion. Connor met his gaze evenly, giving no hints to his thoughts, though they mirrored Dominic's. Sorensen avoided eye contact. Well, with those towers shut down, maybe we can get off this hellhole planet now. The corporal shifted uneasily, and Connor speared him with an intense gaze. Overall, Connor liked Thomas Sorensen. A burly 6-foot with close-cropped blonde hair and chiseled features, the man looked more your stereotypical drill sergeant than an intelligence analyst. Connor's mental image typically saw them as thin, ferret-featured men who only told you what they thought you needed to know. Fortunately, the corporal didn't hesitate to speak his mind, and quite often had something worthwhile to say. But underlying the corporal's demonstrated competence, Connor sensed a vulnerability. Sorensen was not an intel officer. He was used to taking some direction from a superior, and that superior had been aboard the Black Hammer. You've already talked to Taylor, he guessed, haven't you? Sorensen nodded. And it's very unlikely we'll see him anytime soon. I informed him of the laser towers right before joining you two out here. He held up one hand to forestall Dominic's outburst. I am required to report all intelligence to my superior, and in her absence, to the operations ranking officer. Dominic nodded reluctantly. Captain Taylor won't risk the eclipse until we can prove conclusively there are no other towers. What about the rescue company? Connor asked, bracing himself for the bad news. He trusted Sorensen enough to know that if there were any balancing facts, he would have volunteered them. They're being hit hard. They aren't advancing fast enough, and now they can't withdraw either without taking serious losses. We'll have to take the pressure off them by hitting the second operations area ourselves. The real factories are down there. That perked up Connor's interest, though Dominic appeared very unimpressed about taking on a new mission. Team 2 found something? He asked, preempting another outburst by Dominic. His mind began to plan the rendezvous. If we can link up with them, maybe find... Sorensen interrupted, his face pale. Team 2 is dead, sir. Dead? Dominic barged back into the conversation. You mean out of commission? Captured? Unhappily, the corporal shook his head. They took out the hydroelectric facility and discovered entrances for 2 large underground complexes. But clan troops caught them on the second leg of their operation. Neither of them made it. The report we intercepted is fairly clear on that. No prisoners, as ordered. So now Taylor has only half the reasons to come in here and rescue us. Dominic shook his head. Perfect. There are 8 missing mech warriors out there we might still find, Connor reminded his landsmate. If Team 2 made it out, we know that Keith and Tessa are out there for certain. The real fear was hidden in Sorensen's final comment, which Dominic had missed. Who gave the no prisoners order? He asked. Near as I can tell, it came through this Star Colonel Ratash Osis you heard on comms. The one who sounded most upset by Fury's defeat. However, from other communication interceptions, I believe those orders originated with Brendan Corbett. It's inferred. So is the fact that it's Corbett who is leading the fight against the Eclipse's rescue company. He nodded his appreciation for the blunt truth. You're doing a good job, Thomas. Keep it up. No reason to blame the messenger for the news. He wanted it clear that Sorensen should not worry about keeping him informed. Have you plotted a route down to the peninsula's southern coast? I've located a dry riverbed we can use for our initial approach, about 5 clicks southwest around the headland. It avoids a few military targets, which I think is wise at this point. I've already monitored Ratash Osis's order to increase the strength of local garrison posts. He paused. Of course, that means the factories themselves will be very well guarded. Dominic smiled thinly at them both. And it just keeps getting better, he said. Every single minute. 3 kilometers along the riverbed, they found Tessa McConnell, or what was left of her. Near as Connor could tell, something had burned away part of her deployment parachute system. A glancing blow from the naval-grade lasers erected on the island? A mischance run-in with an aerospace fighter patrol. Didn't matter. Without the system's braking effects, Tessa's Crusader had fallen harder than her jump jets could compensate. Both legs were partially buried in the earth. The upper leg framework had been telescoped upward into the Crusader's chest, spearing the fusion reactor and causing catastrophic failure. There wasn't much left of the battle mech. One arm and the mangled head blown a good 100 meters away. Why hadn't she ejected? It was a question they would never be able to answer. All the 2 mech warriors could do was bury her remains. No words were spoken over the gravesite. What was there to say? And Chapter 4 done. And I will be right back with Chapter 5. All right. Getting a little warm in here. Need to take off the sweatshirt. Here we go. Chapter 5. Or Chapter 4. Chapter 4 now. 4. Method and Madness. Lieutenant Sinclair, we intercepted a private channel between Star Colonel Ratash Osis and his aide. Stand by for playback. Smash, Dre. The entire facility. Without those greenhouses, we will be hard-pressed to feed the incoming forces. You warned him. Placing the decoy site so near our agricultural project. I did. But will Brendan Corbett take the blame for this? Neg, Star Colonel. With Lincoln Osis's death on Stronamecti, the Galaxy Commander will be our next Khan. He can do no wrong. Exactly. I will make these Surats pay. This I promise. You catch that, Lieutenant? Lincoln Osis, Ilkhan of the clans, died on Stronamecti. The Star League must be victorious. Now, what do you think the chances are that we can expect relief in time to do us any good? One hand shoving forward the throttle of his direwolf, the other easy on the main stick, Galaxy Commander Brendan Corbett burst through the thin strand of pine and topped the small rise. The enemy column of Freebirth Inner Sphere trash had spread itself along the wide valley, right along the path where he had predicted they would come. He had them by the flank. Tightening up his triggers, the Galaxy Commander lanced out with his set of 4 large extended-range lasers. The sapphire bolts slammed into the side of an Executioner Omnimech leading the line, splattering molten armor to the ground as Brendan Corbett drew first blood in this latest harassing maneuver. Corbett had hoped to put the Executioner down on one salvo, denying the Stravig warriors use of such exceptional technology. A few of the enemy mech warriors piloted captured clan Omnimech designs such as the Executioner. They may have dubbed it a Gladiator, just as they referred to his assault mech as a Daishi, lacking knowledge of the proper names. But it was still clan technology, and far above their deserving. Stolen from the Smoke Jaguar homeworld of Huntress without doubt. He clenched his jaw in a mixture of anger and no small amount of shame as the Executioner managed to keep its feet and return fire with its Gauss rifle and paired lasers. Shame, not for the Omni's strong armor, but that it was in the possession of the Inner Sphere at all. The damage caused when the large nickel-ferrous Gauss slug punched into the right leg of his direwolf was nothing compared to the knowledge that the Inner Sphere now controlled the Jaguar homeworld. Yet he had known it would happen. Forced from the Inner Sphere, chased from the Inner Sphere. The Galaxy Commander arrived back in clan space to find out another task force had already landed on Huntress. Right then he saw the death of his clan, unless someone worked to preserve it, unless he fought to ensure the Jaguar lived onward. That Huntress fell validated his choice to regroup on Tranquil, to resurrect the clan even as it entered its death throes. It did not make the situation any more palatable. The rest of his star stepped up to flank Corbett, a pair of Timberwolves, a Cauldronborn, and a Warhawk. Though faster than the Direwolf, none of his starmates would ever think of usurping his position in the lead. And behind them an auxiliary star hung back, waiting for their turn should the Smoke Jaguar's command star fail. Hardly thinkable. Except that no clan warrior had ever thought to be driven from the Inner Sphere occupation zone either. The company of enemy mechs was already reacting to the threat his star posed. Long-range weaponry flashed gem-colored laser pulses between the two forces and filled the air with fiery tracers that warned of stinging autocannon fire. The silvery blur of another Gauss slug flashed past his canopy ferroglass, impacting his right shoulder and raining more metal fragments to the ground. Corbett hardly blinked at how close death had visited with the near miss of his cockpit. His next salvo of lasers again sliced into the Executioner's left side, this time working its way through the armored sleeve of the arm to stab into the barrel of the deadly Gauss rifle. Acceleration coils exploded with stunning force, reducing the arm to a metal stub that poked from the shoulder of the man-shaped Executioner. The Galaxy Commander slapped at his shutdown override as the Omnimech's heat scale jumped far into the red band. The Executioner turned and ran for the safety of low hills on the other side of the valley. Just as the Galaxy Commander had predicted. Just as it had in the previous 2 battles. "Let them go," he ordered, hot coals burning in his lungs as he sucked in great breaths of the scorched air. He turned his lasers against a smaller Owens, which lagged behind the main company as they all followed the executioner. Two of the Sapphire lances scored into the small mech, coring past armor and into its back, but unfortunately finding no critical equipment. Then his enemy was gone, and his star held the field, alone. With the Inner Sphere forces commanding faster mechs, the Jaguar leader had little choice but to hunt them this way, harrying their advance toward the peninsula and taking them one small piece at a time. It didn't matter. In the end, he would have them all. They would never make contact with the survivors of the first dropship. The few mechs still operating on the peninsula were easy targets for Ratashosis. Well, Brendan Corbett claimed the greater victory and the greater glory by smashing this stronger company. Could he make all 12 kills personally? Perhaps that would be the crowning achievement here that would vault him above all others when the Smoke Jaguars finally chose a new Khan. Finally chose him as the new Khan. Strength. Because that was what mattered. Strength and individual achievement. It was the way of the clans. Good news, Lieutenant. We've made 2 more contacts. Apona Ree from Team 3 and Keith Andrew from your own commando. Apona Ree is northeast of our position and moving to rendezvous. She was first from Commando 3 to drop, but with her survival confidence is now high that we might find others and maybe even the Black Hammer itself. Misery loves company. Isn't that one of Blake's old sayings? Thank you, Dominic. I'm sure we all appreciate the sentiment. Keith Andrew actually grounded inside Operations Area 3, where the Eclipse commandos were all supposed to drop. Currently, he is limited in movement by heavy clan patrols. The rescue company is working their way in to break him free. They really need us to take some of the pressure off them, Lieutenant. I think Keith is in trouble up there. The dark of the massive cavern was broken by large lighting systems used to flood the underground facilities with artificial day. Where the lights did not reach, Connor Sinclair relied on his new Orion's thermal imaging to chase enemies into the shadows and back out again. Mashing down on the firing stud, his autocannon fire hammered into the discovered convoy's last half-track hauler. The 80mm slugs punched large holes through the drab gray armor siding and hood to wreck the engine. He was careful to avoid the fuel tanks and the cloth-covered back of the hauler. Preferred to not risk an explosion in this underground cavern, unsure of the ceiling's strength, as well as being concerned with the reports Sorensen recovered earlier that placed corrosive chemical storage tanks somewhere down here. It wouldn't do to have them go up in a sympathetic explosion. Also, and just as important, was taking care with the salvage that raiding the destroyed convoy would bring. The Commando's mobile field-based vehicles were moving in from the main entrance and would transfer all usable materials and equipment to their own cargo space. Having already run through provisioning provided on the original mission specifications, if the remnants of Team 1 were to continue operating, they would depend heavily on such raiding techniques. He noticed as the half-track driver bailed out and ran for the protection of a jumble of rocks piled against the cavern wall, and let him go. A clan laborer caste worker, he was no threat to the mission. The Puma and the Shadow Cat twin to Dominic's own Omnimech, however, were. Gamma Base, what is your situation? Ratash Osis again, his voice identifiable even through the breakup caused by intercepted transmission and the meters of rock currently above their heads. Osis was becoming a fixed personality in clan comms traffic. Star Commander Isark, respond! Gamma Base, respond now! The Star Commander is dead. We are heavily engaged, Star Colonel. Connor swung the Orion around to face the large quarry that the Smoke Jaguars had hollowed into the floor of the massive cavern. The heavy class mech had been repaired and pressed back into service as his personal mech. It was far better armored and had a working autocannon which made for a nice change of pace. The Puma ducked behind a set of wood-built barracks which overlooked the quarried basin, likely waiting for his heat levels to drop. The PPC-equipped mech glowed a reddish-orange on thermal scanners. Leaving the clan-piloted Shadowcat to face both Dominic and Connor. Where a clan warrior might never interfere in a duel, the Inner Sphere officer knew that such ideal warfare had no place on a 31st century battlefield. He added a flurry of autocannon fire and twin medium lasers to Dominic's Gauss rifle, the combined barrage savaging the front armor of the clan Omni and driving it back against the barracks. One wall was staved in by the Shadowcat's shoulder, but it helped the warrior keep to his feet, where otherwise he would have fallen. A burst of static in his ear warned him of a new Smoke Jaguar transmission.
Delta Point, stay hidden. Wait for it.
Sounded like more elementals, the powered armor infantry troops the clans had devised. So far, the Damocles commandos had run into them just once. An annoyance when alone or in pairs, the battle armor infantry could be devastating in numbers.
Keep your eyes open, Dominic. Watch for toads.
The caution came a second too late. Dominic had walked his Shadowcat forward to finish off his opponent, stepping within 10 meters of the quarried depression. Rising up from camouflaged holes and mounds of hastily piled ore they came. 2 points. 10 soldiers wearing their power-assisted armored suits. Half of them launched a coordinated missile salvo at the Orion, which weathered the storm, but not without sacrificing more of its precious armor. The rest swarmed Dominic's Omni, tearing into its armor with their claws and thrusting small lasers into the rents to burn at the internal structure. One fell under the Shadowcat's feet and was crushed. The mech warrior wisely chose to distance himself from the trap before more elementals fastened to him, and dodged aside. The clan Shadowcat pursued.
Enemy has advanced to barracks area,
a clan warrior warned. A voice tickled at the back of Connor's memory. The Puma's pilot. He had almost forgotten about the deadly light design in the face of the elemental swarm. It had backed in behind the barracks building, and in a few seconds would be in perfect position to strike out at an unsuspecting Dominic Payne. Throttling into a fast walk, Connor ignored the elementals and aimed the massive Orion at the barracks. Wood and iron nails, no matter how well constructed, could never hold up against a determined battle mech, especially one with 75 tons to throw around. The wood splintered with rifle shot echoes Connor heard even buttoned up in his cockpit. He kicked and shoved his way through, bulldozing the 2-story building and then stepping out into the blind alley right behind the Puma. The emerald pulses of his 2 medium lasers flayed at the weak rear armor of the stoop-shouldered light mech. The short-range missile pack riding his left shoulder hammered 3 of its charges home, expanding the destruction and leaving the Puma bare to the Orion's autocannon. He toggled for clustering ammunition. The Kaliyama LB-10X selected its alternate feed system, loading and firing special rounds that fragmented to shower the Puma with hundreds of smaller submunitions. Many of these found the gaps already melted and blasted into the armor, striking deeper to chip away at critical equipment. A grayish-green cloud erupted out the back of the Puma as a heat sink shattered and spewed precious coolant. Then the Omni shook violently as its gyro was assaulted by the shrapnel, losing its balance and dropping to the ground as if Connor had reached in and snapped its spine. Outside the short alley, 2 Shadowcats lurched by, one still bearing 3 elementals, but both trading vicious punches with their left-arm Gauss rifles. The clan warrior could not have missed the loss of her companion. She didn't. Enemy is advancing. Mech warrior Travis lost. Star Colonel Osis, please advise. Although Connor couldn't see what Ratash Osis hoped to accomplish over comms with one mech and a double handful of elementals to work with, he couldn't help the sinking sensation that suddenly clawed at his stomach. Something he was missing. A strategy he hadn't considered. The desperation that might be driving Ratash Osis.
All units fall back to the chemical plant. Go!
No doubts colored the Star Colonel's order.
Target the storage tanks and flood the chamber with the corrosive waste. No more failures. No more excuses. Do not let those Surats out alive. Oh, you've got to be. Lieutenant, you have got to stop them.
Dominic's stunned outburst was cut off as Sorensen overrode his transmission from the mobile field-based vehicles.
If those tanks blow, we're finished.
Exactly what Connor had thought the instant he heard Ratash Osis's order. In the confines of this underground complex, rupturing large tanks of corrosive and poisonous gas would ensure no one made it out alive, warrior or worker. Inner Sphere troops would have almost certainly refused such an order. Besides being borderline inhumane, martyrdom held appeal for so few. Of course, Smoke Jaguar warriors, the decision would be easier. The civilian labor caste workers would hardly matter in such a decision. As for their warriors' deaths, they relied on the clan's eugenics program to carry on their genetic legacy, more often accomplished after death than before. It was part of their society. All they were required to do was prove themselves, and obeying such a command would certainly weigh heavily in their favor. But this was still not quite the clan way, at least not as Connor had come to understand it. Battle mech combat and glory through victory. This latest tactic showed the same treacherous promise as the laser towers which had knocked the Black Hammer from space. Another order passed down from Galaxy Commander Brendan Corbett? Or was Ratash Osis also slipping down from that higher ideal the clans preferred to vaunt?
Don't acknowledge it,
he whispered to his empty cockpit, staring at the Smoke Jaguar Shadowcat which had pulled back while Dominic busied himself smashing the elementals from his own mech. He tried angling for a shot, but Dominic stepped into his way, and there was no maneuvering in the tight alley space.
Refuse, damn you!
Star Colonel. The voice was heavy with 1 part resignation, but 2 parts fanaticism. Acknowledged. The Shadowcat turned from the quarry and ran for the tunnel which connected this underground chamber to the next.
No, you don't,
Connor said, more to himself than the phantom presence of the other mech warrior. He moved his Orion forward, out of the alley, and set his targeting reticule at the next tunnel entrance. He would have 1 shot. It had to score hard. He had forgotten to toggle off the cluster ammunition feed to his autocannon. In the heat of combat, controlling a 75-ton war avatar and trying to keep several enemy targets placed, situational awareness could be strained past the point of remembering each little detail. His LRMs missed, slamming into the cavern wall just short of their target and raining out stone chips and slivers. Following up with fragmenting autocannon munitions would normally be a mistake. The shrapnel rounds good at sanding away armor, but rarely at forcing a breach. Except that Dominic's Gauss rifle had punched 2 deep holes into the enemy Omni-Mech already, and now the fragments worked further into the Shadowcat's leg and blocky torso than he would have thought. The ankle joint threw sparks and wispy blue-black smoke as the actuator tore apart, freezing the animation in that joint. The cat's thermal image also darkened into the dangerous red band as more shrapnel chipped away at the physical heat shield which surrounded its fusion reactor. It was a sluggish and crippled Shadowcat which finally limped from the chamber, followed a few seconds later by Dominic's own cat, and then Connor's Orion. The passage tightened up at once, barely enough room for a mech to walk. The rough-hewn corridor crawled around sharp bends that hid the clan mech from sight. Connor noticed a single elemental still clinging to Dominic's shoulder, tearing away at the armor with the steel claw that replaced its left hand. He targeted it with a single medium laser, careful not to hit his landsmate. The ruby beam sliced into and through the elemental's leg, amputating it at the hip. He fell to the tunnel floor, but with the tough resilience elementals were known and slightly feared for, the armored trooper quickly rose on hands and knees to fire its shoulder mount missile 2-pack. A last act of defiance, since Connor's next laser shot ended his life a second later. But the Jaguar warrior had still cost the Orion and savaged armor when the missile slammed into its chest and right leg. Connor made the next cavern only seconds behind Dominic. An extensive 3-story factory complex had been built to cover most of one wall, spreading vertically so as to leave the floor open. Next to it, a broad ramp, large enough for battle mech access, spiraled up toward a hint of daylight, a secondary entrance to the facility, and the commandos' escape route, if they lived to use it. A pair of immense storage tanks dominated the wall across from the factory. The fled Shadowcat was already targeting the large tanks. An Orion, twin to Connor's, moved down the ramp to bring its own weapons into play. He counted themselves fortunate that at least here the Jaguars had reinforced their construction, taking no chance with an accidental rupturing of the tanks. The Cat was the most dangerous, hammering away with its Gauss rifle, the nickel-ferrous slug gouging large holes into the armor siding. The enemy Orion had yet to clear the ramp's overhang.
I said to blow those tanks. I want a report to that effect. Gamma base!
If the tanks had been blown, doubtful anyone would have time to report. Connor chalked it up to Ratash Osis's attempt to command over a comm system rather than in person. If it wasn't officially reported, then obviously it hadn't happened yet. He framed his crosshairs with the outline of the enemy Shadowcat, only to have Dominic ace him for that target. Dominic's left-arm Gauss rifle spat out a silvery blur that punched straight through the thin rear armor of the Jaguar Shadowcat, smashing aside support structure and shielding for the fusion reactor. The scarlet beam from one of his 2 medium lasers followed, coring all the way through and releasing the blossom of golden fire at the mech's heart. The Shadowcat blew apart, and Connor winced, waiting for the chemical storage tanks to go up in a sympathetic explosion. One of the Cat's arms flew across the chamber to smash into the clan Orion just as it cleared the ramp. The impact spoiled the Jaguar warrior's aim, his first set of missiles flying wide of the targeted storage tanks. The tanks held, and Connor shifted his crosshairs over the remaining enemy to unleash his battle mech's full fury. His heavy launcher spat out its flight of missiles, most of them drawing a straight line of gray contrail smoke to their target, where they erupted in a storm of fire and armor shrapnel. One set of missiles slammed into the Orion's head, wreathing the cockpit canopy in flame and debris. Others worried the armor over chest and arms. His medium lasers carved deeper into the chest, but failed to penetrate the thick armor protection. He had nearly resigned himself to another exchange of weapons fire, and one more chance for the clan warrior to rupture the tanks. Then his autocannon spoke a throaty roar as it drilled a long burst of depleted uranium rounds directly into the head behind the damages missile flight had caused. The ferroglass canopy shattered and the wide face of the head assembly sagged inward under the assault. The battle mech toppled backwards, slamming into the ground, a smashed ruin of its former strength. "On your right, Lieutenant!" Dominic's warning announced the arrival of the remaining elementals, who had lagged behind the charging battle mechs, but were no less motivated in carrying out their final orders from Star Colonel Ratash Osis. After 2 mechs, picking off the 5 remaining battle armor troops seemed to present an easy challenge. It was only when one made it close enough to score the tanks with a laser that both Damocles commando warriors realized the game at which they still played. Fire intensified for a few seconds, and then Dominic was putting down the final elemental with his paired medium lasers.
"That should be the last of them," Connor said with relief. "We're clear."
And apparently none too soon for Dominic.
"Can we get out of here now?"
the other mech warrior asked. A burst of static heralded another transmission from Osis.
"Gamma Base, you will respond!"
The Star Colonel was still looking for verification the commando had been stopped for good. Dominic's Shadowcat pointed lasers and Gauss rifle at the ceiling, as if he could target the Star Colonel wherever his command center might be.
"I'd like to respond, all right. Now they're willing to kill their own civilian workers to get at us. Whatever happened to the old clan idea of honorable combat?"
Sorensen answered the question with frank seriousness.
"When your back is to the wall, Dominic, people do what they can to survive. Corbett is wearing under the strain of a dying clan. Now Ratash Osis is feeling the pressure from above as well." "Gamma Base!"
"I could transmit a report to the Eclipse on an open frequency," the corporal offered. "Let him know he's failed again. Clan officers tend to take that kind of news rather hard." Connor considered it just for a moment. In a way, it would be satisfying, rubbing his enemy's nose in it. In the fact that the desperate tactic had not only been of questionable merit, but that it had failed utterly. Then he lined up his first shot against a factory complex. A communications facility, his computer identified it. Obviously empty, since no one had told Osis of the failure.
"No," he said, squeezing into his shot. "Let him wonder."
The holographic map stretched from floor to ceiling in Ratash Osis's planning room. The projector hummed a soft contrast to the growls rumbling in the Star Colonel's chest and throat. The hollow image currently displayed a 2-dimensional colored map of the peninsula, decorated with small pinpricks of white light to represent Smoke Jaguar forces, and red flags where reports confirmed enemy troops. Near the base of the peninsula, in the shadow of the Cascade Mountain Range, which cut the northern stretch off from the main continent, a single shining star showed his position in Durgan City. A dim light moved around further north, tracking intermittent contact with the enemy mech company deployed by the 2nd Inner Sphere dropship. That dim light was Galaxy Commander, and likely future Khan, Brendan Corbett, relegated to insignificant status by his subordinate, as Corbett ignored the greater danger of the small teams loose in the southern reaches. On the inside of the peninsula's hook, rounding up the headland where the decoy factory site had been, a red swath told of the damage already done. Now on the southern coast, a mirror image of that destruction was unfolding, heading arrow straight at the Smoke Jaguar's hidden mining venture and the real OmniMech production site. Other flags showed a few sporadic contacts along the peninsula's eastern coast, but nothing so important as the threat to the OmniMech factory. Galaxy Commander Corbett did not realize the true scope of the damage already done to the Smoke Jaguar's very limited resources. Osis only hinted at it in his reports. Tell Brendan Corbett outright that he, a member of Lincoln Osis's Sibco, could not handle a few rogue Freebirth? Neg. The Galaxy Commander could not appreciate the difficulty in tracking down a few determined warriors who fade away as fast as they hit. It took time to shift forces around, and the Inner Sphere vermin struck only when at the advantage. In the Star Colonel's opinion, Brendan Corbett had taken a far easier, and therefore less glorious, task for himself in standing against the company pushing through the Cascades. An area on his map began to flash as technicians updated it from news feeding in from the southern reaches. Battle had been joined near the underground Omnimech factory. This time his forces stood prepared. Ratash Osis had managed to shift an entire frontline star into the enemy's path, manned by a set of his best warriors in that region. He did not expect the battle to last long. He was right. After only 10 minutes, the area flashed a dark amber, then on to red. A new red flag positioned itself at the administrative building for the factory and mine complex. The smoke Jaguar Star Colonel snarled his rage in a fair approximation of the clan's namesake. At his desk in 3 quick strides, knocking aside his note pewter as he stabbed at his built-in communications console. The trembling technician who fielded his request made 2 wrong connections before establishing both an audio and visual link with the factory. Ratash Osis filed a mental note to have the tech replaced even as Star Commander Drevin, the warrior in charge of the factory's defense, made his report. The technician was mercifully forgotten as a new rage gripped the Star Colonel.
The entire star? Lost? Incompetent Surats! I am surrounded by the dregs of the Iron Wombs! I should have you all wiping the noses of Sibco brats, not commanding battle mechs!
Drevin quailed but then rebounded.
We will hold them, Star Colonel! You will destroy them, or your legacy dies with you! Is that clear, Star Commander? Use your charges and seal the mountain! If you have to bring it down on top of you, those vermin will not escape! Quiaff! Half, Star Colonel, half!
Ratash Osis disconnected with another violent stab at the console. With more thoughtful motion, he sent orders through his note pewter to ready his personal mech and alert his star that they would be taken to the field at once.
They might destroy the factory,
he admitted to himself in the security of his planning room.
If they might. If they do, it proves them dangerous to the point that even Galaxy Commander Corbett will have to take notice. The warrior who brings him down will be positioned for great things as the clan reforms here on Tranquil.
Command of a galaxy? The position of Saw Khan? What might not be within reach? He stood and strode from the room with deliberate energy.
I will be that warrior,
he vowed. All right, guys. Quick break for a bio break, and then I will be back and we'll start into Chapter 5. Be right back, everyone. Ah, and once again the camera followed me. Excuse me. And OG Barbecue Kitty, if you happen to still be here, thanks for continuing to support the channel. Much appreciated. I know it was a while ago, but I want to say thank you anyway. Let's see, how much do we have left of this? All right, I think we're going to do one more chapter. And then we'll save chapter 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 for next week. So it looks like there are 10 chapters total. So we'll do 5 this week and 5 next week. That sounds like a good way to break that up, because I think trying to do all 10 is going to be too much for one session here. So we'll get halfway through this week. And next week we'll start the other half. Yeah. All right, let's dive in to chapter 5. 5. Complex Solutions. Thanks to our raid of those administrative buildings, we have a good set of diagrams on this underground facility, and it is their mech production site, Lieutenant. From what I've been able to sift through, it may be their only one on Tranquil. It is also lightly defended. The Jaguars counted too much on the facility staying hidden. The front entrance has been intentionally collapsed, a crude but effective shield against an assault, while the Jaguars finish some new Omni-Mechs. Epona Ree is on station at the entrance, and she thinks she might be able to blast her way through, but no promises. Since we're running out of time, I found you another way. You are actually coming in through the back with a bit of applied engineering magic. Stand by for data feed. Under the concentrated firepower of his Orion and Dominic's salvaged Puma, Connor knew the 70-ton Thor hadn't a chance. The first azure whip from Dominic's paired particle projector cannon drew a molten scar across its turret-style waist. The Orion hammered in afterward, missiles shredding the final remnants of armor on the enemy's left leg and driving through the rent over the left side to open up the Omni-Mech skeleton. Connor's autocannon chewed deeper, tearing open the ammunition bin for the Thor's SRM system, and smashing delicate warheads and propellant chambers both. Something gave way, and the entire collection of better than 100 missiles detonated with armor-shredding force. The explosion tore out the entire left side of the Omni, critically damaging the heat shield and severing control of the left arm as the fireball blossomed. The Thor's main weapon, the left-arm Gauss rifle, dropped down to hang impotently against the Omni's side. Only the cellular ammunition storage system prevented the mech's death, channeling the explosion out front and back vents rather than allow it to eat further into the torso. Small consolation, as the tremendous force argued physics onto its side and spun the Thor into a wild, staggering step that finally toppled the war machine toward its left side, and straight into Dominic's second PPC. The man-made lightning arced and crackled, drawing a snaking path from the Puma's large particle weapon to the Thor's head. The stream of hellish energy slammed through armor and ferroglass to turn the cockpit into an instant crematorium. What might have been a recoverable fall turned into a graceless plunge into death. The state-of-the-art Omni-Mech now reduced to so many tons of parts and scrap metal. 2 mobile field bases rolled into the immense cavern, the third having been lost above ground when a star of 5 Jaguar Omni-Mechs surprised the commando. Dominic lost his Shadowcat toward the end of that battle, The Omnimech blown to scrap, but the Commando's warrior ejecting safely. If the clan warriors had worked together instead of as 5 separate warriors, they might have finished off Connor as well. Panting for the escalated heat levels in his cockpit, he surveyed the underground mining complex, the twisted and smoking ruins left of the equipment. 3 clan mechs littered the gravel-strewn ground as well. Their threat ended, he disregarded them and looked instead at the wrecked conveyor system, which Sorensen had promised they could use to gain access to the back of the factory complex. The cavern holding the factory complex couldn't be more than a few hundred meters away, but through the seamless rock wall, it might as well have been a few thousand. As if sensing his name in Connor's thoughts, the analyst spoke over the comm system. "We've picked up a weak signal from Epona Ree. She has dug partway into the factory complex and will try to rendezvous as we press forward. Her last mobile field-based vehicle will guide me back around while you head in through the steel plant."
"Good to know," Connor said. "But how do we get in there if the conveyor system is smashed?"
The structure normally ran 6 meters over the ground in a long bridge from steel plant ore extractor to a ramp cut from the stone wall at the actual excavation site. Sorensen had planned to have the 2 mechs walk up the ramp and onto the belt system, follow it over into the extractor, and blast through an interior wall that would allow them to exit out the other side of the steel plant. A sound plan, except that now the middle of their bridge was missing, and battle mechs were not known for their climbing ability. A spike in the background static warned of an intercepted Smoke Jaguar communication.
"It is too quiet. What are they doing? All posts, check in."
Though clarity suffered, Connor placed it as Star Commander Drevin, the on-site warrior. Sorensen had intercepted a few transmissions between this Drevin and Ratash Osis. Drevin was desperate. Desperate men were dangerous. Desperate clan warriors, he had learned, were doubly so. "I can't raise Epona," the corporal called out over the common frequency. "Too much rock in between." One of the mobile field bases began a tight 3-point turn to head back the way it had come in. "We need to get around the side of this mountain quickly, or we'll lose her." Connor shook his head. He couldn't have Sorensen panicking now. "Calm down, Corporal. Stop that field base." He waited until his order was carried out. "Now think, Thomas. You've got us this far. Your first plans have been upset, so come up with something new. We're 200 meters or so from our target. Figure it out." There had to be another way. Just because he couldn't see it was no reason Sorensen shouldn't be able to. The man was a natural-born analyst. It's what you do best. Do it. Dominic paced his Puma in a tight square, working off nervous energy while the intelligence analyst puzzled a new way through. Connor waited, muscles cramping with tension. He was gambling again, and this time every second lost placed Epona Ree that much further from any support. Finally, "Can't be done, Lieutenant. I'm sorry. No way you can blast through, and your mechs are not able to make a climb like that. You need an elevator, or a ramp." "A ramp!" He allowed himself a tight smile. Sorensen might just as well have yelled, "Victory!" "You aren't 200 meters from your target, sir. You're 6 meters. We need to get you onto the conveyor bridge and into the first extractor chamber." Data scrolled over one of Connor's several auxiliary screens. "Target the following supports beneath the conveyor bridge." He didn't see what that gained them, blowing the rest of the bridge, but the corporal hadn't let him down yet. He selected for lasers only. No sense wasting precious ammunition, and if they made it through, there would be no time for a refit and resupply. Epona was counting on them being there. The ruby beams lashed out, slagging through first one heavy support, then another. The bridge twisted, and even through cockpit armor, he heard the groan of stressed metal, but did not collapse. The third and fourth support fell away, thick metal girders no match for mech weaponry. The conveyor system collapsed. Its outer structure fell flat to the ground, but where the conveyor still maintained integrity, it held up one end into an improvised ramp. A brute force job of it, but he wouldn't complain if it worked. Connor was first up the slope, praying for it to hold beneath the Orion's 75 tons. It did. He smashed his way through the preliminary crusher and into the extraction chamber. "The south wall," Sorensen reminded him. "Burn through." Lasers scored out, but where the girders had parted relatively easily, here the metal resisted. Reddish-orange splatters of molten steel dripped slowly to the floor of the extractor. This was the best industrial-grade alloy, meant to last years of regular scoring and pounding. It wouldn't give up easily. Static flared. "They are coming. No one touches their commander. He is mine." Drevin again. No way he had figured out their plan yet. He was referring to Epona, as if she would be leading in the combined force. She was almost through the Jaguar's barricade, and with no support nearby. He gave up on the lasers, raising his arms against the weakened metal and ramming piston-like blows against it. It cracked and bowed, but refused to give. Dominic held his place behind the Orion, unable to move up to help. Finally, Connor leaned his Leviathan machine back and then simply charged forward, lowering one angular shoulder into the damage already wrought against the wall. It held for a very long second, then parted with a shriek of tearing metal. The Orion stumbled through. Connor found himself in a tight passage meant more for exoskeleton-assisted laborers, but serviceable for mechs, if barely so. No time for finesse. He gave the Orion as much throttle as he dared. Whenever he brushed the unforgiving wall, he left behind more of his protective armor. The first indication of battle was a backflash of ruby light into the passage, coming from around the next bend. The second was Epona's call for help. "Blake's blood!" she yelled, her cultured accent softening the centuries-old curse only slightly. "I'm dancing with an annihilator up here. Anyone about to cut in?" Around the bend, the passage widened quickly into a large antechamber, opening up onto the factory complex. Roughly pentagonal in shape, the complex boasted a level of sophisticated design not yet seen on Tranquil, and never to be found in the inner sphere. As with the previous underground site, the Smoke Jaguars designed it to keep the floor as open as possible. The factory buildings had been built up the wall rather than outward, turning the entire cavern into one large metal-walled chamber. A strange tower in the middle of that chamber glowed with large power conduits and ran heavy cable to 3 automated mech construction bays that occupied different corners of the facility. Nearly complete were 3 new Omni-mechs, nestled back in their cradles as machines continued to work on them. Already complete was the monstrous Annihilator, and the 2 mechs flanking it, a second Thor and an Owens. 100 tons and 12 meters tall, the Annihilator looked every gram of an assault mech. The head was formed up like a thick comb over a bullet-shaped body, which rested on massive legs. The arms spoke of lethal intent, ending in 2 large-bore autocannon barrels each. It was not a design that promoted a call for a reasonable solution. It was one which argued for unconditional surrender. Though not an Omni-mech, it was still a clan technology machine, and so followed their design theory in that it sacrificed mobility for hard-hitting firepower. And at the moment that firepower was turned against Epona Ree. In her time on Tranquil, the new mech warrior had salvaged and returned to service a clan-designed Shadowcat similar to the one Dominic had lost, except this one had been configured for 2 extended-range large lasers and a 6-pack short-range missile system. Her ruby beams speared out, but not at the Annihilator. She ignored the Titan and the damage it visited on her, targeting instead one of the smaller mechs, the 70-ton Thor. Her tactics had thrown the floor into confusion as the Thor ran around trying to avoid her rather than fire on the mech which Star Commander Drevin had chosen for his own. In the much faster Shadowcat, Epona sprinted around the large chamber, making herself a very hard target as she continued to punish the Thor and chase it in any direction that took her away from the Annihilator, delaying tactics as she waited for help, which had just arrived. Connor's first flight of missiles bracketed the Annihilator's back, blasting away armor but unable to penetrate. Though weaker than other locations, the assault mech could withstand a few solid hits before opening itself up to debilitating internal damage. The Orion's autocannon peeled away protection from the other's right leg. His lasers both concentrated their emerald energy into the left arm, unfortunately spreading the damage around rather than taking advantage of the already savaged rear armor. If the weapons barrage hadn't been enough to prove him a threat, that the Orion was nearly of a height with the Annihilator would call attention to him as the commando's leader. No Smoke Jaguar officer worth his heritage would refuse a call to battle. As the threatening mech turned to face him, he could not help the shudder which shook him. His Orion was no match for the Annihilator, and everyone in the complex knew it, especially the Jaguar mech warrior, who raised both arms to level a quartet of autocannon in his direction. Against the slow-moving Orion, there would be little chance for Star Commander Drevin to miss. The spark of tracers flared in the cavern, drawing 4 lines of destruction to the Orion where the heavy-caliber slugs tore across its chest and both arms. The 75-ton mech shook under the onslaught much as he had trembled the moment before. It stumbled backward, the commando leader fighting to keep the battle mech upright by strength of will as much as by his piloting. Failing. The Annihilator juggernaut lumbered forward with slow but deliberate strides. But stumbling backward, trying to regain control of the battered mech as well as some measure of initiative in this battle, a lesson from his academy days flashed back to Connor. The topic had been situational awareness.
"It's a mech warrior's lifeline,"
the lecturer had promised, speaking in a shotgun sentences as if every word counted.
"Some are born with it. It can be learned, true, but it can also be learned wrong, and that can kill you."
Situational awareness covered a wide range of factors. More than just knowing the lay of the battlefield, holding it in your head like some oversized chessboard on which the pieces moved, though that was part of it. When Connor gambled against the pull of gravity and shifted his Orion to the right, it was because he knew the rough rock wall of the cavern was there. The battle mech slammed hard against it, and he heard the distant crunch of shattered armor as the plates over his back were crushed. It was better, however, than toppling to the ground, likely never to rise again with the Annihilator bearing down on him. The pieces themselves were also a major consideration. The advancing assault mech, the Owens, only now moving in from the other side of the tower. Dominic's Puma, from the icon flashing across his HUD, it had cleared the antechamber to come up on the Orion's left. Epona Ree's Shadowcat chasing the Thor, the Smoke Jaguar warrior running his Omni in between the Orion and Annihilator, stopping to twist back and track her advance. With his commander switching targets to the Orion, it left him free to finally answer her attacks. Though he'd never fought at her side before, he simply trusted that Epona wouldn't be there to face the Thor's assault. A slight gamble, yes, but in his mind the picture came together in such perfect form he could imagine no other result. As much as anything, Situational awareness was coordinating all the factors and understanding how they related to each other, predicting the decisions of your own lancemates as well as the enemy. Recognizing that one moment when the opposition was most vulnerable, such as turning their back and disregarding a former target. The clans taught their warriors to prefer single combat above the normal chaos of a battlefield. Their warriors chose a target and attempted to bring them down to the exclusion of all else. In Connor's opinion, they had learned wrong, and it would kill them.
With me, Dominic.
He barely had time for the order before tightening up on his triggers, firing not at the Annihilator, which was presenting 10 tons of fresh armor towards him, but at the Thor, already wounded by Epona's earlier assaults. His autocannon spat out a hard stream of destruction, tearing into the 70-ton mech's left arm and cutting it off just below the shoulder. The Thor's primary weapon was lost, with the arm dropping away to smash against the cavern's rocky floor. A split second behind him, Dominic punched 2 PPC blasts into and through the Omni's right side. The blue-white lightning melted away a large portion of engine shielding and destroyed the control equipment of the right arm, which sagged into uselessness. As good as dead, the Thor suffered one final barrage as one of Connor's short-range missiles and both medium lasers struck at its right leg. Already savaged by Epona, the limb had less to give than the salvo demanded. The leg bowed outward at the ruined knee joint, then snapped off as the Thor fell over onto its side, not to rise again. Epona had already recognized her own advantage, splitting off from her pursuit of the Thor and slipping in behind the Annihilator, which had spurned her for the larger Orion, obviously considering her an inferior target. Determined to chastise the Jaguar warrior for his presumption, she cut loose with both large lasers and a flight from her SRM launcher. Ruby energy flared at the assault battle mech's back. One of the energy weapons drifted low, cutting into the hip instead, but the other punched through to cut at the vital equipment at the Annihilator's core. Molten shielding ran down to the floor, and then high-velocity metal spat out the rent as the assault machine's gyro tore itself into pieces. 3 missiles smashing into the ruined socket sped its demise, and the Annihilator collapsed down first to its knees, and then slowly, almost gracefully, to the floor. At once, the assault machine attempted to get its arms beneath it, to fight on despite the ruined gyro. The Jaguar warrior was not giving up. Dominic had already split off to challenge the Owens. Connor advanced with Epona to pour more firepower into the downed assault mech. It would not be allowed to regain its feet, or even a prone position from which it might fire a pair of its large-bore autocannon. Gem-colored laser light flared, carving at the fallen mech as the commando warrior struck again and again. When the Owens fell under Dominic's PPCs a moment later, the fight suddenly seemed to flee the Annihilator, which collapsed over its arms and lay silent. Connor noticed a large hole burned through the back of its head, one of Epona's large lasers finally ending the Star Commander's struggle. The 3 Damocles commando battle mechs held the floor and the factory.
Not bad work, Epona.
Dominic walked his Puma over to face the Shadowcat, presumably so he could wave through his own cockpit canopy.
We could have used you topside when that star of Omnis hit us. Well, better late than never,
he said, forgetting, conveniently, in Connor's opinion, that here it had been Epona who had arrived first. Late? He could hear the adrenaline rush in her voice, shaking that usually soft accent. Payne, do you have any idea what it took to get here at all? Bloody mission, cock-up, scattering us all over the peninsula. Diplomatically, Dominic retreated.
Sorry, Ree. Glad you made the party,
Though all things being equal, I'd rather be seeing the Black Hammer. Epona re-calmed, coming back into her own self-assured voice. Every indication, including Jaguar comm intercepts I picked up, point towards its complete loss. Except for Keith Andrew, and he's still stuck up north. We're all that's left. Connor sighed to himself, then dropped his jaw down low enough to engage the contacts and open a channel. So much for the cavalry, he transmitted. Not for the first time of late, Dominic's pessimistic view of the world was beginning to look the more clear, and with each addition to his motley force, the strains worsened rather than improved. Epona's Shadowcat shifted on mechanically taloned feet to face the larger Orion. It gets better. Keith ran into some heavy laser towers in the northern stretch of Operations Area 3. We're acquainted with those, Dominic interrupted. Well, these can target ground forces as well as low-orbit ships, so don't expect much in the way of support until those are taken out. She paused for a second to let that news sink in, then, in fact, play it safe, and don't expect much at all. Extremely good salvage, everyone. Can't ask for much better than a clan factory. We might ask for a working dropship. I'm working on that, Dominic. In the meantime, Epona's earlier scouting has pointed out several good routes leading into the next operations area. With Osis close in on our position, we will do better on the move. Every step takes us that much closer to the eclipse. You know, I don't remember signing on for the walking tour of Tranquil. But am I happy to be here? You bet I am. There we go, everyone. We have made it through half of Trial Under Fire. Next Tuesday, we will do the other half. Hope you guys have enjoyed this so far. As always, thank you so much for being here with me tonight. Hope you guys have had a good story time with me this evening. Made it through a good 5 chapters of the book. We'll do the next 5 chapters next week. I expect to be back again tomorrow night. Tomorrow night, I believe, is Abomination Vaults. Hope you will come in to join us, Pathfinder Abomination Vaults, on Foundry VTT. And of course, Thursday, Stompy Mech Night. Have a great night, everybody, and I will see you guys all again really soon. Good night, all.